Crow Nation of Montana and the Plight of Native Education. The Crow Nation's reservation is located in the modern-day state of Montana. According to author Joseph Medicine Crow, the Crow Nation migrated westward from the Great Lakes region of North America, looking for buffalo. Within the state of Montana, the Crow Reservation is located in the southern half of the state in Crow County, shown darkened on this map. The county borders the state of Wyoming to the south. While Europeans began settling the North American mainland beginning roughly in the early 1600s, the Crow Nations purported not to have come in contact with Europeans until 1743, when some Crow met a pair of French explorers. The delay in meeting Europeans did not soften the effects of European colonization and diseases on the Crow. The Plains Indians have become stereotyped, depicted as being simply teepee-dwelling, horse-riding tribes. But while those descriptions may match parts of the Crow lifestyle, there was a great depth and meaning to the Crow life that is missed in these stereotypes. This image is of a traditional dance and is followed by images of native Crow in their traditional outfits. The Crow did use horses, and these images are of women on horses followed by two Crow cowboys. Eventually, as with other native nations in North America, traditional ways of life were infringed upon by encroaching whites. Missions began to form, which gave way to various sets of Euro-Americans migrating to the land of the Crow Indians. The concept of race and difference was used by Euro-Americans to exploit the culture of Crow Indians. This image was taken long before different cultures were thought to be equal and respected. The native Crow were forced to become westernized at the behest of the United States government's policies and ideals. The Crow's traditional freedom was taken away. As the native peoples began to become exposed to Euro-American ways of life, the westernization of the Crow became prominent. A key concept of westernization was the so-called white man's burden. This belief held that civilized, industrialized whites had a duty to lift up these so-called lesser peoples. This was directly seen in the attempts of Americans to educate the native peoples. This image is of a marching band of the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. Boarding schools, like the Carlisle School, were prominent and often forcefully populated with native learners. This image is of the 1904 Girls World's Champions basketball team from Fort Shaw Indian Boarding School and helps to show that the native learners were able to adapt and excel in the boarding school environment, as truly horrible as it was. Beginning in the second half of the 20th century, native education began to turn away from forced assimilation and learning to slowly making strides towards becoming more traditionally centered. The Indian Education Act of 1972 marked the beginning of a return of power to the native nation's schools. Since 1972, the federal government has passed the Executive Order of Native American Education in 1994, which saw the federal government recognize that education should focus on the learner, not on changing them. Federal rulings are not a fix-all to the disparities in native education, as writer Myrna Eshelman notes in the article entitled, "Issues in Native American Education." Eshelman points out that, quote, "In the past, education believed that the job of schools was to help individuals assimilate into the predominant culture," end quote. Since then, federal rulings have helped, but Eshelman points out that the main focus of education should be, quote, "helping students negotiate back and forth between cultures, teaching them to be culturally savvy so that they can succeed in the predominant culture, but at the same time, honor and support their own cultural roots and traditions," end quote. Eshelman further points out that for this to successfully happen, more than the current 10% of educators need to be of a minority group to have any relevance to students. The Crow Nation has been fortunate in that Crow Agency, Montana is home to Little Bighorn College, a 2-year college that caters to native learners and teaches everything from information sciences to the Crow language. This is not true of all tribes in North America, unfortunately. This college has allowed for members of the Crow Nation to get an education and also serves as a launch point to get a 4-year degree from a university elsewhere. Looking at the class offerings of the school truly shows a traditional but yet progressive attitude taken towards education, helping the Crow Nation to become relevant to the present times but yet remain rooted in traditional ways of life. It must be recognized that the native nations of the United States, for example, are not as fortunate, and the disparities between the Crow and the average American is truly drastic. However, a great deal of progress has been made from the time of American missions and will continue to advance as time progresses.